course, how to be an auto mechanic, okay? So it's your money, so pay attention, all right? I mean, you're paying $175 for the course, you know?
Wait a minute, it was 125.
Well, now it's 175. You know why? I didn't put it in writing. That's your first lesson.
Okay, we're talking about the Pontiac 389 today, and I'm going to be using some various books, and this is just so that if anybody wants to stop and read, they can, or they can just listen to it and watch it once. But maybe there'll be some stats here that will be helpful to you. This is out of an old auto repair manual. When I was a kid, I used to love looking at these pictures. I'd go through these books and just look at all the identifications. This is an old auto repair, Glenn Auto Repair. I also got this. I recommend this book if you're working on Pontiac, and it's in really bad shape. It's not because I've read it 1,000 times, but it's because I left it out in the rain. And I'm not going to use this because they might get me for copyright. I also have this other Glenn's Repair Manual, and as you can see, it covers 57 to 67. And I'm using these 3 books from my references, you know, on this rebuild I'm doing. But the main book I wanted to show you was this one. This is the actual, you know, shop manual that they would have had at the garage back then. And I got 2 of these, and we're going to open this up and take a look inside. And I'm going to slowly scan the pages, and so that if you guys, anybody that watches this wants to, and they don't have this manual, you can, you know, you can pause and read it. Hopefully it'll come out good enough. Let's see what happens. And here we go. And I know that's, I'm just showing you this, but we're going to get going on it. And some pictures of my car when I was taking it apart and putting it all together, painting and all that in the backyard. That car show. Alright, let's see if I can't do this and make it so it's, you could read it. I'm going to talk about a guy I knew. I said I was going to before, and he's the guy that got me started working on cars. It was my old girlfriend's older brother. She came from a family of 5. There was 3 older kids that the mother's first husband passed away. I never knew him. And their last name was Ellis. And then she had 2 more kids, and I was dating one of the daughters. We started going out in 1969. And we were together a long time. And when I first started going up to their house, they had a bunch of cars in the backyard. Her dad, his name was Pasquale Pomerolo. Coolest guy I ever knew in my life. He was a saint. He was really a saint, but he loved station wagons. He used to drive in and out of Boston every day. He drove for St. Johnsbury Trucking Company. And when I first met her and went up there, in the backyard there was a 58 Pontiac Safari wagon and a 57 Chevy station wagon. Neither of them ran. And one of the older sisters with the last name Ellis, Jeannie, her husband had a couple of gas stations in Brockton, Mass. One on each end of Montello Street. I'm throwing this in because anybody that's from Brockton will know what I'm talking about. And they were Flying A gas stations. And he did take those 2 cars away, and I don't know what he'd do. He probably junked them because they were junk. But who knows? But the dad always drove station wagons, like I said. And they were always smoking, you know. And her brother, the first time I helped rebuild a motor, you could say, was with her brother, and was in the backyard. And it was, I think it was a 60 Chevy wagon, if I remember right. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but her brother, he was born December 7th, 1941, so we're talking 69, so he is, I don't know, about 28 years old at the time when I met him. I guess that would be right. And he learned how to work on cars hanging around a guy that lived a few houses down from them. Same thing, you know. And the guy that taught him, I never met. All I knew was his name was Gooch. They called him Gooch. And my girlfriend's mom did not like Gooch because he had naughty pictures hanging up in his garage that Dave would go over and see, you know. I remember her talking about that, and I figured that would have been like 1956, you know. So how naughty could those pictures have been in '56? I not want to get political, but nowadays the kids see worse probably in the second, third grade, right in school. But we're not going to go any further than that. So anyways, I helped him with that rebuild. And he rebuilt that. It was a 6-cylinder, like I said, Chevy. And he rebuilt it right there in the car. He didn't pull the engine out. And I remember, you know, I'd sit there and hand him tools, and he took it all apart. And he honed the cylinders, you know, with the motor in the car engine, and put in new rod bearings. That's what I mostly learned how to do with him was, you know, rod bearings and rings. And he'd, you know, he'd put new seals on these, clean everything up, torque everything to specs with the old-fashioned type torque wrench, and get them going. And they'd smoke when you first start them up, of course, but in the end they'd stop smoking. And her dad, he'd probably get a good 30,000 miles out of it before they'd start smoking again. Then he'd get himself another Chevy, and before long, you know, he'd buy one that cheap, and before long, you know, he'd be doing the same thing. Now, he had other cars he did where we did pull the engines out and, you know, got a little more into it. But that's where I got my start. And he'd, you know, get under there and change ball joints, get there with a little sledgehammer and a chisel, and chisel the rivets off and all that. And that was the beginning of me getting my hands dirty, you could say. And that was kind of all I ever learned was from him, and then the rest was on my own from there. And I worked out in the backyard with him probably for a good 5 years. And it wasn't daily, but off and on. You know, they'd have somebody come in and he'd do it, and I'd go out and help him. Now, he did have there a 60 Falcon he had picked up, and he put a Chevy 283 in that Falcon, and it had a 3-speed. He didn't have no money, and it had a 3-speed standard shift transmission, and the clutch, he had a thing hooked up to they called a slave cylinder. And I know it was hydraulic clutch, but I never really quite understood that. And he put a one with the 283 in it. He had what he called a straight axle, and he got it off one of those little old Metro mail trucks. So he had a straight axle on the front of that thing. And then he had a teardrop hood scoop that wasn't functional. And then I don't know where he got it from. I can't remember what kind of car, but he had an airfoil, you know, like whatever you want to call it, on the back of the trunk lid. And if you know if you're familiar with 60 Falcons, then you know where the gas cap is on them. Well, he bundled that thing in, and he got a gas cap off of a Super Bee and mounted it on the top fender skirt, like they are on the old, on the Dodge Super Bees. And we painted it it was primer, red primer. But I worked at a place making gumball machines, and they'd paint the gumball machines, spray paint them. And we had I brought home with burnt orange paint from the place. And we painted it burnt orange. It had a blue interior, and we bought that spray window tint. And it had blue window tints. The windows were tinted blue. And that car it really looked cool as hell, the way it sat. And he had chrome, those cheap chrome wheels, call them chrome reverse wheels on it. And when you'd rev that up and pop the clutch, that thing would really kind of throw you back. It was like amazing, even though it was just a 283 with that, 3-speed stick on the floor. And it wound up getting sold. It didn't ever he never did register it and put it on the road, because it never got welded. The rear end was a Chevy rear end in it too. And the drive shaft had been, I think I don't remember where he got the drive shaft from, but I believe it was shortened. And it was a 410, 411, whatever you want to call it, Chevy, I guess it's a Dana. Maybe it ain't, I don't remember, but I know it had he said 410 gears. And we never got it out on the road and actually got it raced or anything, but he sold it to a guy, because he never actually, the rear end, it was on leaf springs, and the straight axle at the front, the straight axle was bolted in, it wasn't welded in. And he told the guy, if you're going to start driving it, you got to take it to a place and get it welded in correctly, or the bolts would start eating through the frame. I guess these here are important, when I say important, this is stuff out of the Pontiac book, for a 59, and I'm sure a 60 would be the exact same. And the guy that bought it, I never saw it again after that. I don't know what happened to it. After that, he got himself a Dodge Super Bee that he had for a while. He was always picking up cars people didn't want anymore for short money. I remember he got I think it was like a 73 Cadillac, and the transmission was shot in it. And he'd take stuff apart and clean it and put it back, and he'd read books, and he'd take it apart, and he'd just keep doing this till he either gave up and he'd, call Al to come get it, or he'd get it running again, so you could drive it. And he got that Cadillac to where you could drive it. It did slip some, but he drove that around for a while. He loved that. It was gold, big old gold 4-door. And he sold me, I had a 63 Olds he sold me that he picked up for short money. He got me not my first car, but my second car. My first car was an Opel Kadett station wagon that my father picked up for me from where he worked. And it was he worked for the newspaper, and they tried using these Opel Kadetts to drop all the newspapers off at the machines for the newspaper kids. It was a 67. And he got it for, I think, $75. And this is a 67, and he got it in 69 for $75. But it had well over 100,000 on it, and it was totally beat to crap. And he wound up letting me have it, and that was my first car. It was a little 4-speed, 4-cylinder And the fastest I ever got that thing going was about 65 miles an hour out on the highway going downhill. Everybody used to laugh about it. But it was a cool little car. I was driving that Opel Kadett home one night. Me and the girlfriend there. And been drinking, and it was super foggy out. I was driving too fast, and I hit a curb. And I hit it so hard it blew the tire, bent the wheel, and it bent the frame. And her sister's husband, Jeannie, the guy with the 2 gas stations, he had always wanted, he kept saying, you want to sell that car? You want to sell that car? Because he figured, wow, it was like 1970, and he knew he could sell that pretty good money, being a 67. And I said, yeah, you can buy it. And he came and got it, paid me $50 for it. And about a week later, I drove it for a while after the frame got bent, and you literally couldn't drive more than 100 miles and you'd blow the tire. The right front tire would keep blowing in it. And what was the left front? I can't remember, to be honest with you. I was in my senior year then in high school, and over in Brockton they had this giant pile of tires. At some kind of like tire dump. And we'd go to that dump and go through it, and I'd look for tires that would fit that car and get them. And, I had a couple of extra rims and would get them mounted. And then ride around them. And when you get a flat, if you had enough people in the car with you, you'd lift, everybody get out and pick the car up and then lower it down after they got changed the tire. But he bought it, and he was all happy when he took it out there for $50, and about a week later I seen him at her house. He was really pissed off, and he says, that thing's got a bent frame, you didn't tell me. And we said, oh, we didn't know, and he said, yeah, right. But he was cool about it. This guy was a crook himself. I mean, he was bad news when it came to, he'd make deals all the time, and you know how it is. And when it comes to horse trading, and this guy knew about horse trading because along with owning the gas stations, he was a farrier. And if you don't know what a farrier is, it's a person that shoes horses. And he was licensed to do it. He used to work at the racetracks. Up there in Massachusetts in the summertime, they had the fairs, and they'd have the Brockton Fair, the Weymouth Fair, the Marshfield Fair, and the Topsfield Fair. And they'd have horse racing at them. And he'd be there, taking care of the horses. So old David, he worked at a shoe factory in Brockton, Massachusetts. In the old days, New England itself had tons of shoe factories. It was the shoe capital of the world back in the day. Right into the 50s. Then the 60s, it started to change, and the shoe factories started closing. And they're all gone now. And the ones that are left, a lot of them, they're big, huge, kind of cool-looking historical buildings. And rich people buy them and turn them into apartments. And, people brag about owning an apartment in one of them old buildings. And if you went and looked it up, how much to buy like a studio apartment, one of them in New England right now, you'd be like, oh my God, But time marches on, as they say. I hope this stuff you can, if you pause it, you can read it okay. I've never really done this before, and I might be going too fast because I'm trying to pay attention and talk at the same time. And I'll tell you what, if anybody watches this and they say, hey, can you do it again, but don't talk and go slower, I will. I don't mind. This is at 19 minutes. They might not even post it, so it's going to 20 now. I'm going to see if they'll post it, and then I'll do part 2. Thanks for watching.